Good day, everyone. Welcome to the 22nd edition of the Talking Interoperability webinar series. This is a dialogue series for advancing interoperability in the social protection sector. I'm Kim Arora, Knowledge Management Advisor for an adaptive social protection project called AVSAR, and I work with GIZ India, and I will be the moderator for today. And today we are going to talk about early warning systems and how we can create interoperable systems for shock responsive social protection. I see our participant count steadily rising. We have some 47 people available already. And while more people join, let's go over some housekeeping rules for the webinar. Um, yeah, there we go. Many of you would have already attended other webinars in this series, and perhaps you're familiar with these little operational details. But for those of us who are joining for the first time, we'll go over them once more. This webinar, first of all, is available with simultaneous interpretation. I am speaking in English, but those of you who would like to listen to me in Spanish, French, and Portuguese, we have simultaneous interpretation available. To select the channel of choice, you can go to the controls toolbar that you see right at the bottom of your screen. Um, you perhaps will find it once you click those three dots that say more, and there you'll see an option that says interpretation. Once you click that, you can select your language of choice. I believe by default, Zoom plays the original audio at a lower volume by default, but I believe there is an option to mute the original audio completely in case that is more comfortable for you. You see a chat box on the side. You can use that chat box to share resources, links, and comments. However, if you have any questions, we request you to please use the dedicated Q&A box to post them. This makes it easier to track all the questions and mark the ones that have been answered. Some of our panelists can even answer the questions directly in the Q&A box if time does not permit for them to answer them during the course of the call. Additionally, there are more features. If you wish to ask your question anonymously, I believe Zoom also gives you that option. And if you see a question that was already brewing in your mind and somebody else was fast enough to type it first, you can simply upvote that question, and this way we know which questions are most popular and we can triage that accordingly. This session is going to be recorded, so if you have your camera and microphone on, please bear that in mind. If you do not consent to be recorded, you may keep your camera and microphone switched off. I see we now are up to 69, even 70 participants. That's great. So we have housekeeping out of the way. I believe we can move to today's agenda. Let's go over the agenda. So we'll first go over the theme of today's webinar and get familiar with our speakers and panelists. This will be followed by presentations from each speaker, followed by a discussion and Q&A. We can move on. Today we are talking about early warning to early action, interoperable systems for shock responsive social protection. We'll hear from the following speakers. We'll start with Mr. Joe Zarur of the UN World Food Programme. Joe is the digital/AI social protection advisor at the UNWFP. He has experience across private consulting and the nonprofit sector. He specializes in public administration, governance, and digital transformation, leveraging innovation and AI to strengthen social protection and disaster response systems for vulnerable communities. Joe will be followed by Mr. Alexander Yeager, who is a senior social protection and climate change specialist at the World Bank. Then Alexander has about 10 years of experience across international institutions. His work focuses on climate risk finance and its linkages to social protection and labor systems, including ASP, that is adaptive social protection, just transition, just transition agendas and related conceptual work. We then have Mr. Mulder Mukutmula, who is a disaster risk finance specialist and scalable safety net mechanism coordinator at the National Local Government Finance Committee of Malawi. He has been working in the fields of disaster risk management, humanitarian action, and social support since 2010. So that's 16 years already. He holds an MSc in International Humanitarian Action and an MBA in Financial Management. And then all the way from Costa Rica, we have Miss Sandy Gordon, project team member EMAS. We'll hear more about EMAS and Sinirube during her talk in the webinar. She's a business administrator and a specialist in post disaster needs assessment, something we all know as PDNA, and disaster recovery framework. She has over 23 years of experience working in public institutions. After this stellar panel, we also have discussants. We have Mr. Atanase Akumuntu, the acting chief digital officer at the ministry in charge of emergency management, or MINEMA, and the Ministry of Environment. He comes with over 17 years of experience in land information systems, IT architecture, system interoperability, large scale IT projects, business analysis, and hands on software development and product management. Our second discussant is Ms. Nina Bekele. She is a strategic partnerships development manager for social impact at Google. She leads collaborations with governments, international organizations, NGOs, and academia to apply Google's technology for public good, focusing on climate resilience, crisis response, food security, education, and digital transformation. Well, now that we know who we will be hearing from, let's go over with a brief word about the organizers of this webinar, that is the Digital Convergence Initiative, or the DCI. The DCI was launched in 2021 as a joint effort of the USP 2030 members, governments, development partners, civil society organizations, and private companies to support the digital transformation of social protection systems. It is funded by the EU and German government and the German government, and it is coordinated by 5 partners, that is GIZ, ILO, World Bank, Expertise France, and FIAP. What does the DCI do? The DCI's work is spread across 4 pillars. Can we have the next slide, please? Thank you. The DCI's work is spread across 4 pillars. It facilitates global knowledge sharing, wherein we organize webinars such as this one that you're attending, in-person events, and also creates knowledge products. You can check out the website to access some of these knowledge products or even recordings of past webinars. Second, it builds consensus on technical standards to enable data exchange between digital systems in the social protection delivery chain and with external digital databases. Third, it supports countries in their digital transformation journeys through the 5 implementation partners you saw on the last slide. Currently, the DCI supports about 21 countries. And the 4th pillar of DCI's work is capacity building and training in digital transformation. The webinar series that is talking interoperability was launched by the DCI to have in-depth technical conversations on integrated and interoperable MIS systems across countries. Over the course of previous webinars, we have heard from countries ranging from Brazil to South Korea to Romania and so many more. Recordings, as mentioned earlier, are available on the DCI website. The last 2 webinars explored the interoperability between employment systems and social protection systems. And today we will do a deep dive into early warning systems and how they connect with social protection. Now, without further ado, I would like to call on Mr. Joe Zarur from the UN World Food Programme, who will talk about why EWS matters and what we need to make it work. Over to you, Joe.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you super well.
We hear you.
Thanks very much.
You,
Sorry, I've been having trouble connecting. Thank you very much, everyone, for your attention and contribution today. We really look forward to a sort of a very guided discussion today. We thought first to start with, next, please. Maybe we thought we'll talk about the key topics of the day today. We thought maybe we'd sort of set the stage and then walk you through a few examples of where and how WFP has engaged in this process, and then give you some nice country contexts. So basically, talk a little bit about the a few examples from the warm heart of Africa to the stunning land of 1,000 hills, bringing you two examples. So without further ado, if we may skip, please. Yes, thank you. So basically, I apologize, the previous slide. As we all know, previous slide, please. Thank you. We all appreciate the economic and basically human savings that comes with acting early, as opposed to responding to a certain event. So with that in mind, we all appreciate that there are multiple hazards taking place in many countries, and that somehow exacerbates the solution and the response mechanism. So as long as we have prearranged early scenarios and simulations in place, this would help a lot with the faster response time and lead times. If we were to think of an early warning as information about a hazard that might occur, then maybe an anticipatory action could be sort of a prearranged action where we plan that action with a response mechanism, and then we get the right stakeholders in place, and then we ensure there's the right protocols, mechanisms, and standard operating procedures. Next, please. So basically, to answer the how of that question, so we appreciate that information and action are two separate things, but basically acting on that information requires a certain mechanisms and procedures to be in place. There's a need, obviously, to understand the who and what is exposed in a hazard. On top of that, the evolution of that hazard as time zero comes closer to that event through tracking. And obviously, warning and communication is another element that helps decision makers sort of mobilize resources. And finally, predefined measures can be gauged through a degree of thresholds that we agree with based on localization and context. When these thresholds are exceeded or come close to being met, then a certain trigger or action would be forecasted and would be acted upon. Obviously, there are many limitations, including data quality and the need for continuous validation from, sort of from a ground truth and a human intervention in different areas. Next, please. So if we were to say that basically forecasts must be converted into actionable scenarios, there are these thresholds that we talk about. So basically, that would define the what, the when, and the how. And basically, there are multitudes of data elements at the moment, either from land observation or Earth observation, that would help us into developing forecasting scenarios. And basically combining models with local knowledge becomes a key element on the predictive elements that we build. And not to forget to mention as well, transparency and basically tagging of information and decision making when it comes to organic versus synthetic data making. So developing these models would require a certain degree of elements and procedures to be in place. Next, please. Now, this brings us to the crust of the matter, basically. If we were to think about interoperability, I think we all appreciate that there are these layers of interoperability that include technical, operational, and purpose driven layers as well as institutional. If we were to summarize this, there are insights and there are rails, basically, that would help us in determining sort of what the infrastructure could be, what data elements can be used, and what systems can be activated to certain actions. And what's most important as well would be for that data to be exchanged, there needs to be those mechanisms of integration, of interoperability, but also a clarity on decision making, a clarity on roles and responsibilities and agreement, as well as coordination within sort of whole of government and external partners. These are elements that we always see as important. And I think just to stress here that more and more these predictive models that are in place require a sort of a pipeline of data that comes in at the right time with the right quality in order for these systems to develop these predictive capabilities that they promise. And next, please. So just to mention a few elements that we've seen, obviously having the right data in the right quality format is very important. This is a key element. For example, if we were to collect device data from weather stations, or if we were to tokenize a satellite image RGB color into an action, then these are two separate data insights that might either collide or overlay on top of each other for better decision making. The completeness of data is important, so having all the right attributes in the fields and having the right data dictionary in place helps us to map all these data elements together for consistency. Timeliness is an important thing as well. Is it asynchronous or asynchronous? Is there a delay of half an hour or 2 days for that data to feed into the pipeline to get into that dashboard for decision making? And obviously, from a protection, responsibility, and reliability of data, there's an element of verification of that source that would come in place. Obviously, there's a need to use that data responsibly and to ensure there's a minimal sort of collection of data for the purpose of the actionable element and ensure there's a safety and a truth sort of element embedded into that decision making. Next, please. If we give an example of, for instance, what does it look like for one of the WFP interventions? If we think of frameworks and policies, for example, there are specific interventions that WFP work on that includes basically strengthening information, coordination, early action planning, simulation exercises at different levels, national, subnational, and local levels, and include the development of standard operating procedures. So a convener to bring all these entities into one room and then coordinate and simulate an event that might take place. We also have shock responsive social protection methodologies that we assess the country's capacity and then identify certain elements that need to be in place for either a memorandum of understanding or a mapping of a data set or a flow of a certain process or workflow in place. Obviously, there are tools that we can use and leverage that would help us. Maybe for the sake of today's webinar, we chose two examples. The first tool would be a climate monitoring and forecasting platform that we have called Prism. So basically, we're going to hear from Malawi that will give us an example of how and where Prism was deployed and what were the benefits of that solution. That would include possibly overlaying hazard with population data, as well as doing some risk analysis and identifying triggers and thresholds and response elements and early warning through an existing platform and tool, as well as we work with government agencies and other partner providers not only WFP tools, including, for example, the Google Flood Hub example that we will also learn from Google and on how this was deployed. So basically, these are predictive AI models that use riverine and flood element data for forecasting. So these are examples of what sort of toolboxes we can bring in, basically depending on the context and what the government sort of ask is. Next, please. Now, externally and internally within WFP, we have a set of tools that we use and a set of criteria as well to enable early action and anticipate events before they actually take place. Obviously, we leverage hazard data, vulnerability data, food insecurity, and many other elements. We track sort of the progression of shock events as they move. We leverage geospatial data and satellite imagery. And most importantly, we work very closely with national agencies to ensure that their data is fed into these models that are deployed and used for decision making. Next, please. So a couple of things just to mention that the stakeholders that are involved are many and are very crucial to the functioning of the entire ecosystem. And they include obviously disaster agencies, meteorological agencies, water board, housing, space, social protection, and many other agencies that we will hear from today. We've chosen two examples today on how we will talk about the Malawi use case, how institutionalizing anticipatory action through a national dialogue and leveraging a tool helps us in interoperability and definition, as well as in the Rwanda case on overlaying multiple data sets together for the management of a key shock, which would be landslides in the country, and then how decision thresholds are enabled. Next, please. So basically, there are decision factors we talked about. There are thresholds that need to be identified and agreed on. There's also lead time that's important. So in order for an event to take place, there is a sort of a calculation of a number of resources and time that need to be in place, and also the dissemination of early warning. Finally, we acknowledge that there are stages within disaster risk cycles, but also there are value chains within social protection steps. The question here is, at what stage can we build those use cases? For instance, from a targeting perspective into social protection systems, is the data fed one way or two way from both spheres? We'll learn about the examples that will be given by our government counterparts. With this, I want to thank you for your attention, and we look forward to answering any questions you might have and learning more about the examples that will be highlighted today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Joe. The bit on the WFP toolkit was particularly relevant. And if time permits later, we'll perhaps come back to you for further discussion on data sharing. But for now, I'd like to invite our next speaker, Mr. Alexander Jaeger from the World Bank, who is going to take us through social protection additionalities in EWS. Alex.
Great. Thank you so much for having me today. Yeah, I'll try to get a little bit from Joe from the early warning side to social protection. We have some general challenges when we are going beyond simply conveying information about events. So going beyond the information side, we want to do so because we know that there is way more impact if people not only know about an event that is upcoming, but also have the resources to deal with it. And when doing so, we also know that speed and scale really matters. However, what we haven't done yet, differentiating a little bit between the different events. Of course, in the case of a drought, we already know that often months ahead before the event happens. In case of a hurricane, it comes down to a few hours. Now, we also know that building systems is a good thing, but building systems not during a crisis, but preparing them before is much, much better and much more effective and efficient. I want to add that building systems in general is a good thing. And what we have seen also in our operations is that in some countries, when systems are built during one crisis, they help the next crisis. So it's a good thing to build systems. But of course, doing it well prepared ahead of time with efficient resources, enough resources, that's the best. Apart from that, we often face last mile problems in the reaction to disasters, meaning that we need to have the systems that identify the people in need, identify how much they need, to have the right targeting, and the payment, in our case of social protection, cash transfers, ready at hand to deliver as soon as possible. Also, on the last mile, in case of a disaster, coordination can become a tricky thing. Coordination between government, international institutions, and NGOs, but also within the institutions. We'll come to that in a second. Next slide, please. So those are the challenges. And of course, today we kind of put forward social protection as a solution to those challenges. Why do we think social protection systems are a good thing to answer to those challenges? It's firstly because those are existing infrastructures and we don't need to put something up in addition. We also think that it's important that countries have an ownership over the system, which is the case for social protection systems. They also give a rights-based approach. So it's not some kind of charity for people. It's something that they can count and have the right to ask for it. And we think those systems are there in the long term, before shock secure, after shock secure. That means there is a long-term sustainability. Also for people, it's something that they ideally already know about. So they're familiar with. It's not something that drops from the sky in case of a disaster, but something that is part of their life already. When we talk about social protection responses, we often talk about vertical expansion and horizontal expansions. By that we mean that we either deepen the delivery for the people that already get services through our system. So that means they get additional resources in case of disaster, or horizontal expansion, by which we mean that we reach out to more, a bigger share of the population. That means that instead of only focusing on the very poor or the ultimate poor, we want to extend this to also to people that are at risk of poverty, because in the case of a disaster, very often those people are at risk to also fall into poverty. So we want to extend the amount of people that we want to deliver to. We always talk about different core components that will be repeated. Social registries are the one thing, so that's the data side. A targeting mechanism, so we know whom we want to reach with what resources, and then payment systems that actually make it happen. Next slide, please. So this is actually maybe the most important slide of what I'm talking about today, because we got a little bit into the weeds. So keep in mind on the right side that if we want to integrate early warning systems and social protection systems, it's really two process structures that need to be interlinked at different levels. So of course, on the early warning side, we have all the risk monitoring that Joe talked about, the early warnings that go out, and then the trigger activation. On the social protection side, we have the beneficiary selection, we have the payment and disbursement, of course, we have a monitoring of the impact. And all this needs to be linked, and there needs to be feedback loops implemented so we know how to improve things. Now, when we talk about integration, we distinguish between technical integration and institutional integration. Technical integration means that we want to integrate the hazard forecast and the social register data. We want to overlap the geographical aspects and the economic vulnerability for the targeting. We want to hardwire this into trigger mechanisms. So that means that we know exactly when things should go out, and ideally it's all automated, but very often we need to have a little bit of a human ability to check on this. And then we want real-time tracking so that we know when we do things, what happens on the ground. So that's a bit on the technical side. On the institutional side, it's really about multi-stakeholder coordination, not only between the different types of actors, but also within. So that means agreed roles between, let's say, meteorological institutions, disaster risk management functions, and social protection agencies, or ministries of finance who actually provide the financial resources for it. On the later side, we also need to make sure that we have the resources pre-agreed at hand. Very often here it starts getting a little bit complicated. We're talking about layering of different financial instruments that we have. So starting from all the government budgets that are readily at hand up to more complex solutions like insurance or bonds. So, but that's topic for a whole another conversation maybe. But just to have in mind, those are the different things that we need to integrate. Next slide, please. So I'm going through things a little bit in speed because we really want to talk about the cases that we'll see later. But I guess what's important often for us to argue is to say, okay, where do we actually want to reach with it? What do we want to achieve? We have different levels of achievements that we want to have. We have the direct impact of the concrete response. So we want to have a fast response. We want to have responses that reduce the asset depletion. So that means that the impact on the households is minimal and they don't have to look for alternative ways to deal and cope with disaster. We want to safeguard the nutrition outcomes. We want to make sure that there is no or the minimum acute malnutrition, and we want to reduce displacement and migration. We want to make sure that people can actually live at the spots where it makes sense. Of course, we don't want to have maladaptation either. If there are some geographies where it just doesn't make sense anymore, like in certain riverbeds, for example, then of course we have to think about it. But as long as that isn't the case, we really want to make sure that people can live where they want to live. All this needs to happen with a certain economic efficiency. We very much know that the sooner we react, the more we save, the longer the support takes, the more will be the expenses. So we want to reduce the need for expensive emergency interventions, and we want to lower the long-term recovery needs. And after all, of course, this is all about strengthening the systems. We want to make sure that the national institutions are ready for shocks, and we want to have improved government capacities and, of course, credibility as well. Last slide, please. So there are just a few key messages from Joe and my kind of general overview. We know the function of early warning systems. They are there to predict the risks. We talked today about social protection delivery systems as a response to those risks and how this can be integrated to what we call interoperability. When we talk about interoperability, we very often talk about technical and institutional interoperability. None of them is to be underestimated. We want to do so before crisis strikes, so we want to be prepared. And then, of course, we want to know how things went. So we want to have evidence. And very important is what we're talking about today is not something up in the air. It's not a crazy new idea. It's something that already happens at the ground. We're very happy that we have now some country cases that they will be talking about. Okay, thanks very much. Back to you, Kim.
Thanks, Alex. Thanks for that concise presentation, especially the nifty little recap right at the end. That was very helpful. Now I'd like to invite our next presenter, Mr. Mulder Mukutmula, who will introduce us to Malawi's journey in EWS, particularly with the social cash transfer program and the scaling support provided by Social Support for Resilient Livelihoods project. Mr. Mukutmula, over to you. Has he dropped off? Is there a connection problem?
It seems like he dropped off.
Okay, no problem. We'll get some tech support for Mr. Mukutmula. Until then, in the interest of time, if we may just move forward and move right away to Ms. Sandy Gordon. Can we do that? Sandy, would you be all right with that going first?
Perfect.
All right, great. Now we have Ms. Sandy Gordon, who will talk about GeoSinuribe, a geospatial tool, and how it helps strengthen adaptive social protection. Over to you.
Thank you very much. If we do not have a clear horizon of how we can help other people that need assistance, this is a question that we have had in Costa Rica for a long time now. And within this mainstreaming of risk management, our intention is to help to reach the people who are most vulnerable. Saying this, our interest is to strengthen the social protection, and Costa Rica has been recognized. And we have wanted to have this mainstream social protection and the risk management to developing a platform that was not only meant to provide an alert, but also to provide a geospatial data that allowed us to identify different factors within the population and prioritizing poverty and extreme poverty and vulnerability too, because we have our measurements with a territorial and accurate territorial approach. What is accuracy for us? Well, knowing where the families are, reaching them, getting to the people in their households through actions that are targeted to comprehensive actions. So we had an emergency, we dealt with it, and we consider once again poverty, emergencies. In the next slide, please. And we thought about different objectives for this. We do not have a platform that gathers all the information. We have different platforms, separate platforms with different sets of data. So we thought, well, we need to combine all this. And based on this, we created an IT structure. And then Joey mentioned that if we do not have quality data, how can we make sure that we're going to have a process for interventions? That's why we worked in parallel with the academic sector to create a proposal to correct the data that are currently in our system. GeoSinuribe is not only a platform where we can find risk management data. Sinarube is hosted in a database of 90% of the population in Costa Rica. That's why it's so important to have the data, to use the data for our forecasts, for our projections, and they have to be accurate data to develop a geo-reference system. As we said, we have geo-reference data on the one hand, basic information data of households, and created one single portal to be able to identify in a single place the data that we need is actually what we want to achieve. Next slide, please. And this is where we incorporate this information. The country has had climate change consequences, and we have seen that we needed urgently a response. And I take what the other two panelists mentioned before, and we cannot work in the response if we do not know where we have to work for protection and prevention, and how are we going to work with these recovery processes. So the geospatial analysis allows us in a preventive way to generate a response and to go beyond. And geospatial analysis in indigenous territories allows us to design a system that is adapted to indigenous peoples. And this allows us to keep the importance and the relevance of their territory, to protect their environment, and also to have a registry of people in the health care services, not only to provide a response for a person with all their life conditions, but also taking into account whether they are in a poverty situation or if they have a certain disability, so that we can anticipate this and take into account their participation in society so that it is not limited. And this makes the process more complex. So to have this sort of inclusiveness in these prevention responses. Next slide. This is a proposal that we thought within Geo Sinirube, and this is what we thought about initially. We got together with all the institutions that had the information that we needed, and we added ours. So here we thought that this was a win-win situation. This is what we always look for, to win data, to achieve acquired data, information, perspectives, possibilities, forecasts, to be able to prevent and to provide a response. So we incorporated information from the National Emergency Commission, which is the national emergency care services provider. So here we are prioritizing populations in indigenous territories and populations who are in a disability situation. And if we move on to the following slide, we see that this framework is expanded quite a lot. And we're not only seeing, as I mentioned before, different maps, and what else? What else can we see here? What can we find here? How can we find information? Here we can see households, housing, we can generate statistics, we can incorporate the disability elements, if the head of household is female or not, how many people are part of that household, how many people are economically active, their level of income, their occupation, if it's an informal or formal occupation. So we can see all these statistics within this platform soon, and we have incorporated quite a lot of information too. Now, if we move on to the next slide, what we did was to think about clusters, thanks to the support of the World Bank. All these resources, because we thought about this, we wanted this, but without the resources to create this, it would have been very complex and it would have taken us many years. So the World Bank is a very important pillar for Costa Rica for the building of this platform. And we have the knowledge, and they gave us financing, they gave us support, people who gave us many resources. And we created these clusters to identify the poverty status, multidimensional areas of poverty, basic poverty, extreme poverty, vulnerability, different areas that require intervention processes in the face of an emergency. Next slide, please. And as I mentioned before, even though it's true that we prioritized different populations in the map, it doesn't mean that we cannot create more maps with other poverty dimensions that are multidimensional, as we said before. So if we want to know, for example, if we have a volcanic risk, we want to know what is the status, the condition of the roof of those houses. So we can get this information. We can know if they have access to water, for example. For population data, we can know information so that we can provide intervention processes in keeping with their needs, their age, if they're babies, if they're underaged, what kind of needs, what kind of food they need, what kind of resources they need, vitamins, proteins, if there is a single head of household, or if it's a female head of household, if the husband is in a situation that he cannot provide for his household, different situations within a facility, and of course the levels of poverty that we mentioned before. So this allows us to know if we can classify the statistics by level of poverty. The rest of the factors can be added, and we can generate a scenario as to what intervention processes we could implement. Thank you. Next slide.
And of course, we cannot forget about the most important issue for us in this platform, with this social protection. And we can see that this is very much linked to the availability of financial resources for a state. It also enabled us to visualize what could be the cost and the planning of the state as regards to resources in order to provide support to the families. Because as I said before, if 90% of the population is inside this platform, we can see whether they have insurance, whether they have a family member that is providing financial resources to the household, if they have any other pension system, or if they have a student's insurance, or if the refugee insurance, because we have to consider the importance given our geographical location in terms of migrations. And also using the words of Joe, we need to focus on a specific area. We also have to think about the fact that the family has to go through a recovery and rehabilitation process as regards financial resources. And of course, if the response of the government would be a subsidy or a payment to solve the emergency situation, we also have to think about the fact that we are within a society and that we need to know whether it's a formal or informal job, whether it's contributing to have an insurance or not, or whether it's unemployed. Next, please. And within the process, we said, okay, what do we want to achieve? What else do we want to achieve? This really is very ambitious when we realize what's the amount of information we can work with. And this is what we promised the World Bank. We promised that we will have a database of georeferentiated households. We are trying to improve now the quality of the data, also integration of hazard zone maps provided by the National Emergency Committee. And here we can talk about meteorologic, water, floods, tsunami, landslides, mud. And also we have interfaces for interoperability with the Costa Rican Electricity Institution to obtain geolocation data for households registered in Sinirube. And of course, this interoperability enables us to know that the data we collected or provided face to face when we go to do social intervention processes, we can check or compare those data against other databases to have the most accurate data possible. And that's why we think the interface with the interface with the electricity institution is very important. But we also have some populations that do not have electricity service, so we need to capture that data also, those data, and use these data for the processes I mentioned before: prevention, response, and if possible, recovery. And also, we need interfaces for interoperability with the ADESEP, which is one of the institutions we have here to provide services. And so we don't need to go and look for a development institutions that would tell us which is the data of their subscribers or their payers. And no, we can get the information from a relationship with these organizations, and these will enable us to do the following: to have an updated document or of interconnection protocols. We know that is what is in black and white can be done, can be improved. So we are working on that document currently. Also, a shortened form for emergency care. That document has already been created, and we think that facing an emergency situation, we cannot be filling out documents and documents. And so we need to ensure the protection and the help to the families. And that's why it's important to have this form plus the data we can obtain from our connection with the other institutions and our database. These are just basic data, minimum data we need in order to trigger processes. Also, taking into account Costa Rica's legal framework, we have to take into account that there are sensitive data that cannot be public domain. That's why we think that we need to enter into agreements that would enable the national population to keep the privacy of the information, because the fact that we are facing an emergency doesn't mean that we are not going to observe the rights of those people. Human rights should be already protected here. We need to have also an internal protocol for updating information, because, of course, this is not done after a crisis. We still have all the population, elderly people, poor people, and so we need to adapt ourselves. And as I said before, we need to have agreement with academia, with the universities, because the professionals are the ones that help us to give the first steps in this situation. And it's important because this does not just enrich the educational process in the country, but it also strengthens Costa Rican systems. And of course, we need to think about a contingency plan. This is something we are currently implementing. We are trying to develop now our contingency plan. So, for example, in case we need to connect through satellite, how are we going to do it? What do the professionals need in the field in order to obtain information and continue working? And as we say in our project, and that the machine keeps on working, keeps on running. It means that we stay operative all the time. Next, please. And that's it for me. We also have some questions also that we think are very important for the debate or the Q&A session. Thank you very much. Next.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Sandy Gordon. Very, very helpful to see how end-to-end deployment of a tool like this works. You gave us the whole journey of user journey of the tool, really, which is very, very instructive. I believe our speaker from Malawi is having some connectivity issues, so sadly, we will have to skip that presentation. However, we do have more discussants, and we have somebody from Rwanda, Mr. Atanase. If I can please request him to unmute himself and switch on his camera, just so that we get another country case study in the mix. Are you there? Are you able to? There you are. Yes.
Yes, I'm
Hello.
there. Yes.
Perfect. So we've seen this case example from Costa Rica, but we know that Rwanda as well seems to be advancing in the integration of EWS. So, which national agencies does the MINEMA currently collaborate with for early warning, preparedness, and emergency response? And what kind of mechanisms do you use to ensure coordination across ministries and sectors, really?
Yeah, thank you very much. Yes, this is a great question. So the ministry in charge of emergency management, MINEMA, is actually doing the coordination role, is actually coordinating the efforts for the disaster or emergency response management. So we, as you know, an early warning and early action is a cross-cutting approach that requires collaboration and coordination across sectors and institutions. We are working with mainly public institutions, starting with the Rwanda Meteorological Agency, Meteo Rwanda. This is an agency that provides weather forecasts, but also do the monitoring of the hazards, but also early warning information. So those information are feeding into the national preparedness system. We have so far as a ministry developed an early warning information system, which is already in place and catering for two main hazards, landslide and storms. As Joe said, we have already recently integrated with Google Flood Hub, because we are now using AI models, especially in riverine forecast model. Apart from meteorological agency, we are also collaborating with the Rwanda National Police and of course the Ministry of Defense, Rwanda Defense Force. They are the crucial partners in operational response, security, evacuation, also logistics during the emergencies. We have also another ministry, which is the Ministry of Local Government. This ministry supports in the coordination of local government structure for the community level preparedness and reporting through the district command post. We have what we call the district command posts. Yeah, of course, we have other command posts even at the national level, like one we have at Minema. So we have also the Ministry of Health, which is responsible for emergency preparedness, disaster outbreak alerts, but also response coordinations in that sector. Apart from the Ministry of Health, we have also the Ministry of Infrastructure, MINEFRA, especially for the infrastructure like roads, like electricity, but also safety, but also that wash sector that the ministry is coordinating. And of course, the Ministry of Agriculture and Animal Resources. This is the one which is coordinating the food security, early warning, but also the response planning, especially in the field of, or in the sector of agriculture. Yes, we have other stakeholders, the Ministry of ICT. I cannot go without mentioning that we have even established a national emergency telecommunication plan in support with ITU, but also WFP. So the plan is already in place and we have started the implementation. We have also Rwanda Space Agency. Well, that's where we rely, especially on the data they share with us, especially spatial data, satellite imageries, as my colleagues have actually mentioned. But we have also the Red Cross, Rwanda Red Cross, which is supporting in community response, relief distribution, but also in first aid. And then comes WFP. The WFP is also supporting in the response and recovery, but also in the digitization, such as the improvements on our early warning information system and those interoperability that we are trying to implement. So on the question you asked about the mechanism that we have, the platforms, the committees, data sharing frameworks, all those are the frameworks mechanisms that we have put in place to ensure coordination across the ministries, but also the sectors. So let me give you some of the examples of the committees that we have. We have the disaster management committees at the national level up to the sector level. At the national level, we have the National Disaster Management Committee, which is playing a coordination role. So this is the High National Committee chaired by the Ministry of Minema, Minister of Minema, but also it brings other key ministries together, like the Ministry of Environment, Agriculture, Health, Infrastructure, Local Government, and others. But we have also the National Disaster Management Technical Committee. This is called NADIMATEC. Again, this is one, supporting especially on a day-to-day operational, the implementation and operational coordination across the ministries. There is also the National Platform for Disaster Management. So this is another one. But we have also the thematic working groups in place, like the Emergency Watch Technical Working Group, EWASH Technical Working Group, which is coordinating water sanitation, hygiene, emergency actions, and all those. So in the frameworks, we have also the data sharing systems framework. As I said, we have this early warning information system, which is implemented with the landslide and storms, were the 4 categories of storms. But also recently, as I said, as far as interoperability is concerned, we have integrated our early warning information system with Google Floods in the support of WFP. Thank you very much, Joe, for your technical support and the whole team. So we are now starting to see how we can even integrate with the social registry, because we collect too many data. And another support that we got from WFP was actually to establish a data collection tool using ODK. This one has helped the ministry to collect too many data, especially disaster impact data. Those ones are already in our early warning information system. And then we need to integrate with the social registry to get data about households, or information about the population that we need to support in case of emergencies. So those are the systems that we have. But also looking at the plans and policies, we have the National Disaster Risk Reduction Management Policy. As I said, also we have the National Emergency Telecommunication Plan. This is a framework that will help us to ensure resilient communications infrastructure, but also real-time data sharing, because if you do, early warning means also sharing those or disseminating data out of the systems. So that's telecommunication plan will help us in that endeavor. This has been developed with the support of ITU, but also WFP. I think that's all. Thank you very much. If you can go to the next question. Thank you so much.
Yes. No, that's great. That's a huge range of ministries: health, defense, infrastructure, ICT, space agency. And of course, you have a fair number of committees and coordination groups, thematic working groups coming together. And like you said, you mentioned multiple times, there's too much data. But to what extent do population, vulnerability, and socioeconomic data contribute to DRR planning and response? Of course, you have your satellite data, remote sensing, and what have you for weather. But how do you look at the key social data sets that Minema would like to use more systematically for perhaps risk profiling or humanitarian response?
Yeah. Thank you very much. Data is crucial. Nowadays, even people say that data is like gold. It helps in this decision making. For example, the population vulnerability and socioeconomic data in DRR, it contributes actually to identify who is most vulnerable and where to locate him, especially in case of incidents or hazards. When we have those disasters, we can very easily identify who is needing the support assistance using the data available. But as I said, even though we are working with many stakeholders, we do not do the duplication. We do not duplicate efforts. That's why interoperability is key. So we get data from systems are meant to work out to speak to each other. So using those data, we can just easily identify who needs support or assistance. But also we can, using them, we can improve the risk profiling and prioritization. Yes. And then this data can enable early action and shock responsive social protection. Yes. Those data can also support in targeting. Yes. Efficient humanitarian assistance can be also provided based on the data or the analysis collected out of those data. Yes, that's it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And luckily for us, while we were talking, I believe our presenter from Malawi has been able to join again. So maybe we'll hear from them after all. Mr. Mukutmula, are you there? Can you switch on your camera and mic, please, if you can hear me?
Yeah, sorry for that. I'm here.
No problem. No problem. Over to you.
All right. Thanks a lot. So I'll just go through the Malawian presentation on how we use the early warning system to strengthen the livelihoods. So this is just telling the whole story. First is the number one is we look at the rainy season in Malawi, where we can be able to predict that in the coming months there will be food insecurity based on the drought. So we also use the satellite data, the PRISM. Then sometimes because of the technology is not all that right sometimes. So sometimes we use what we call ground truthing, because in one area we may say there were rains, but when you look on the ground, there were no rains. So we also use the ground truthing. Then we have our own the scalable mechanism handbook that we use as pre-agreed guidelines. Then we also use the e-payment, the digital payment, so that the communities should be able to get their resources. Next slide, please. So we just highlighted the use of the PRISM. That's the platform for real-time impact situation monitoring in a couple of districts. And we also use it for drought, and also we have used it for the floods. And we are able to trigger the payout to the communities on time before the disaster occurs. So in most of the areas, we were able to reach out to the communities before the disasters. However, there are two of them. There's one which we are piloting now, and there's another one that was supported by the World Bank. Another slide, please. So how do we target? What we're looking at is that our emphasis on air system, there are two. We used for floods, and in this case, we are now using it for drought signals. So we follow the rain patterns. Then while we are controlling the rain patterns, we are able to see how the amount of rainfall that has just fallen. Then we can trigger the thresholds that we have. So in each and every district, they have their own thresholds. So when the threshold has reached, then it triggers the payout. So it triggers what we call a shock response social protection mechanism. Then who supports is that, we have our baseline. I think I'll discuss more further as we're going through. We have what we call the regular social cash transfers, what we call the vertical expansion. And we have what also the horizontal expansion. These are now the additional households from the climate smart public works. So we have two. We have the social cash transfer, who are the regular beneficiaries, but because all of them, they suffer the same. The only difference is that one has got the labor constraint, the other one has got the labor. So from there, we use the defined households. From there, they are ranked from the poorest, poor, poorer, poor, and the better off. So that's how we use the social care transfer. And where do we get these people? We have what we call the Malawi Social Registry. So because they are ranked in the social registry, it's so easier for us to get the poorest, for example, the poorer and the poor from that. So we're talking about the ultra poor in the communities. So in Malawi, it's 10% of the what we call a district council. The number of beneficiaries is about 10% of that population of the district council. So all these are registered, all the beneficiaries are registered in the Malawi Social Registry. Next slide, please. So we have two triggers. I mentioned that we have two projects that we are operating on. We have two triggers. We have what we call the primary trigger. Now, the primary trigger is based on the satellite data. So it's what we call the early season and up to the full season. So the early season starts in November and it ends in April, by 10th April. So we monitor the rain patterns. After monitoring the rain patterns, if any of the 8 districts triggers within that period, immediately we disperse the funds. However, I should mention it that according to the design of the program under the World Bank, Social Support for Livelihood, the program is for consumption. So you can see that sometimes we trigger in April because our rainy season ends in March. So we trigger in March sometimes. The main reason is that people should be able to procure maize while the prices are still low, because the designing of the program is for consumption. All right, next slide, please. So for us to identify a district, in other countries, they call it province, but we call it a district. We look at those 5 characteristics. So the first one, that district should be a drought prone district. Over the past 10 to 20 years, we should talk about food insecurity, vulnerability. We also looked at the poverty levels, because a district may be food insecure, but when you look at the poverty levels, they may be a little bit high or low. So we also look at, when we were designing this program, we also looked at the system readiness. Here we're talking about the delivery channels, the delivery systems. For example, is the Malawi Social Registry at 100% updated in that district? We're talking about digital payments, because we don't want people to lose their dignity by lining up just to receive their monies. But we're talking about now the digital payments. Are the systems ready? Also, we looked at the other interventions by different stakeholders and different players. So if we are all in one district, at the end of the day, the cake will be taken by the same people, because we're targeting the same people, we're targeting the same communities. So we looked at there are other interventions by other stakeholders. If they were there, then we move to another district or to another area. Next slide, please. So the shock response in Malawi, basically, we are looking at like what we call the scalable safety nets. This is an instrument that we use to reach out to the communities before the disaster or the shock. So in most of the cases, where we are able to predict that there will be a flood in this area by using the area warning systems. There will be a flood, there will be drought in this area, which means if there are all that, there will be food insecure in those districts or in those areas. So this is a program that, as I mentioned, is supported by the World Bank, and it's a donor trust, the fund that we have. Also, we had the Global Shield financing facility that procured our insurance for us to be able to implement. So far, when we started in 2020, our target was to reach out to 300,000 people. However, we have managed to reach out to almost 800,000 households. Next slide, please. So what was the objective? The main objective was for our pre-agreed decision-making processes and finance on standby to support quick delivery of relief. So you agree with me that if the government takes about 72 hours to respond, the people now try the negative coping mechanisms. So if you see that, for example, we talk about ultra-poor communities whereby they have managed to build some assets. But if the government takes time to reach out to them or to support them, the first thing that they would do is to start selling their assets. So if somebody was just above the poverty line, that means they're sliding into poverty. And those who are already in poverty, they will go deep into poverty. So the main aim was to reach out to the communities faster so that they can have a cushion instead of selling their assets that they have built over maybe 4 to 5 years while they are on the program. It is easier for us to support them. So as I talked about the two parametric, in that we had the parametric insurance that we had, and also the contingency flexible financing that was also provided by the World Bank. Next slide, please. So in the first picture you see on top, you can see that we have the vertical and the horizontal expansion, whereby the vertical expansion is that the amount of the cash transfer that we give. So under the vertical, if you look deeper, you see we have what we call the regular social cash transfer beneficiaries. These are the people who are on the social cash transfer program. So the more people we add horizontally, it reduces the amount that we give to the beneficiaries. So for example, if there are 10 beneficiaries and we're giving them, let's say, $50, the more we add, the lesser the amount that they'll get. So we have to balance up. Will there be an impact? If we add more people, will there be any impact? That's why maybe you may see that the program only focused on 17% of the ultra poor in the district. So we have the horizontal and the vertical. So basically, we are looking at the period of 3 months. Why for 3 months we pay a once-off for 3 months is because during that period we're expecting the government to come in, what we call the rain season. So after the people have harvested, the prices for maize are still low. The people can manage to procure the maize. Then when the government is coming in with the lean season, which is more to do with the drought or the floods, that means we have cushioned the people and they are able now to survive. Next slide, please. So far, this is just a summary. Of 2025, for example, what we have managed to do is that the resources that we have, the contingent finance from the government item, it was around 37 million US dollars. While we had also resources from the global shield, around 22 million US dollars. For when we started with the insurance, I think we have managed to gain some from the insurance that we had for the past 2 years, because we had a 2-year period for insurance. I think I can go to another slide. So why we had to insure, financing mechanism is so simple. It's because it was more like to do risk layering, because there is no one size fits all. Sometimes the insurance it can trigger or it may not trigger. Though that's why we had a fallback up on the contingency flexible financing. Apart from the drought, we also use the resources that we get from the World Bank to respond to some of the shocks. For example, the cyclone Fred. We were able to predict that after the announcement that there will be cyclone Fred, we were able to pre-position ourselves, and also we managed to reach out to around 81,784 households. At the same time, last year we had a shock in the urban. This was due to the inflation, devaluation of the local currency by 44%, just once, by 44%. And our colleagues in the urban, most of them, they work who live on hand on to mouth. So instead of doing, following the Fed and also following this devaluation, we thought that it would be good for us to assist. You can bear in mind that we are coming from the COVID. Then in some of the cities in the southern region were hit by floods. And now we had this economic shock. So we also catered for the households. We targeted 105,000 households. We use the social cash transfers for 3 months, but most of the times we prefer doing a once-off because of administration costs. Next slide, please. So these are some of the things that we have learned throughout the period, is that when you have a pre-established rules and the financing, it helps this to speed up the response. The main reason why we are saying this is because you have like a guideline, okay, well documented. If this happens, this is what we're going to do. So in terms of if, for example, we have already in line to say, if a district triggers, how long should it take for us to disperse the funds to the service providers? Who should be in a position to sign, to authorize the report? So we have all these arranged already. all the offices agreed. The Department of Disasters, what's their role? The Department of Meteorological Services, what's their role? And the National Local Government Finance, what would be their role? So what we have done is to come up with a document that we feel like it has helped us, because in the past, the government was more like reactive. But now, with these assistance that is coming in from the World Bank and other institutions, the government is becoming more proactive. So it's no longer waiting for the disaster or a shock to happen, but we are trying to move towards being proactive, whereby we can be in a position to respond or to predict and reposition ourselves before the shock or during the shock. Another slide, please. So going forward, these are what we want to do. Currently, we are in eight districts. We had in 10 districts because we just added another one, 2 more. So with the new program coming, we intend to go nationwide. Also, we would like to do to implement the flood triggers, especially in the northern and southern part of Malawi, where we have challenges with floods. So we feel like in some of the districts, they are drought-prone districts. In other districts, we feel like they are flood-prone districts. So we would like to pilot in those districts in the north, apart from the ones that we have done in the south. One of the areas that we would like to do also is to look at the payout evaluation. So since we are going towards the end of the first phase of the program, we would like to do like after action review to learn so that we can share with our colleagues from other institutions. I think I should stop there. Next slide. I don't think there is another one. If I may stop there. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this action-based perspective, and particularly with this specific example of Cyclone Freddy. It's really instructive real-world case study, and I'm sure it is relevant for several other countries, country contexts where they can take something away from this. Thank you so much. And thank you also to all our other speakers for giving us such a wide range of talks that covered everything from the basics of linking EWS with social protection to really showing us on-ground examples of project implementation and learnings from real-world experiences. One thing that was a thread throughout these presentations and talks was the use of data and how to collate it, how to ensure the right data ends up with the right agency so that there's relevant action on the ground. And at this point, I'd really like to bring in our other discussant, our second discussant, Ms. Nina Bekele from Google. If you could please unmute yourself and also, switch on your camera. Thank you. This is something we can't escape or ignore. Data is all important in these kinds of contexts, especially with social registries and what have you. And no conversation over here is complete without AI in the mix. It is advancing rapidly, and what opportunities does AI represent? Does AI present for strengthening climate resilience and social protection systems, particularly in the global south, in your opinion?
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Kim. Also, I'd like to take a moment just to express my gratitude to Mulder and Atanaze to share so in-depth examples from Malawi and Rwanda, as well as from all the other speakers. For me as a representative and private sector, it is always incredibly helpful to understand what are the real world needs and how we can potentially collaborate together. So on my end, Kim, you already introduced me earlier. So I am Nina Bekela. I lead our product partnerships for social impact here within Google. And I collaborate closely with international organizations and governments to help to provide technology and particularly platforms to disseminate alerts, as well as AI research models to help to strengthen national early warning systems and anticipatory action programs. So before I answer your question, Kim, I'm going to spend just a few seconds providing a little bit of background what Google is actually doing in that space and why this is relevant to us. So quickly, at Google, our mission is to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. And in times of disasters, that mission becomes a profound responsibility. So when you are in a disaster situation, you will likely turn to information platforms like Google to get contextual information, to understand what is going on, how to stay safe, whether you should evacuate. And so this becomes profoundly important to us. So the topic that we're discussing today on climate and crisis response and social security is deeply aligned with what we're doing in that space. So how are we addressing this exactly? There are two different areas. On the one hand, providing critical information, such as surfacing alerts. So Google has billion user platforms, for example, Google Search, Google Maps, and Androids. And we're surfacing authoritative information and critical helpful resources on these platforms. So for example, over the past 12 months, we helped people to find critical information in 3.6 billion times. So that's more than 10 million times per day on any given day over the past 12 months that people were finding critical information related to disasters. And one way how we can do this is when authoritative organizations are publishing resources through the Common Alerting Protocol. So I'd like to put this out here. If you as an authoritative organization, as a local government are issuing alerts, we do encourage you to do that also using the Common Alerting Protocol, which is a standardized framework that helps organizations like us to surface your information to affected populations. So that's one aspect. And then the second aspect, and that's what we're going to dive a little bit deeper into today, is our research arm and our what is the role of AI in that space. So we have two major research arms, Google Research and Google DeepMind. And we develop AI models that are addressing some of the world's biggest challenges. And we can do this for two major reasons. On the one hand, we have incredible engineers and AI talents. On the other hand, we also have very vast computing power. So that means that we are also able to run very complex and comprehensive models. And we're looking into particular climate and Earth artificial intelligence applications in that space. Over the past couple of years, we developed models on different areas. For example, flood forecasting. We're excited that some of the organizations represented here in this room are already collaborating with us on that space. So flood forecasting is one model that we're focusing on. Cyclone prediction is another area. Wildfire detection, for example. Earthquake detection. There are different areas where some of our research teams are focusing on. And we're working closely then together with governments and international organizations to translate these predictions and research models, AI models, into real-world impact. And to add a little bit of color to this, for example, for flood forecasting, floods remain one of the most destructive climate hazards, and they're extremely difficult to predict, especially in data scarce areas. We've been able to, over the past couple of years, since 2018 to be precise, we looked into whether and how we can forecast floods, specifically riverine floods. So over the past couple of years, we've developed a model that is able to forecast riverine floods up to 7 days in advance in over 150 countries, covering more than 2 billion people. And what is special about that model is that it's a global model that relies on globally available data and publicly available data. So we're able to train this vast model and learn from countries that do have comprehensive data available. And we are able to understand what constitutes a flood, what are the drivers for floods, And based on that information, we're then able to create also predictions in data scarce areas. So where we do not have historic flood data or very limited historic records of floods available. And in that case, this is a major breakthrough for riverine predictions, as we're able to provide forecasts for riverine floods, even in data scarce areas, which is often the case in the global south. And where possible, we align, our goal is to align with the WMO single voice principle. So that means we aim to provide these forecasts to the national authorities to help strengthen them to their operations, the early warning and response operations, and to issue alerts to their communities and to their communities directly through their channels. Just to add a little bit of color to this on how we collaborate. And Kim, I see you would like to ask a follow-up question. Maybe I'll let you ask a follow-up question and then I can share a little bit more.
No, just a very short question because we must move on to audience Q&A after this as well. Can you share an example of how your AI models have helped people stay safe during a disaster?
Yes, very happy to dive a little bit deeper into this. So I'd like to double click on 3 examples, and no worries, I will keep it short. One example is we're collaborating together with a World Meteorological Organization and selected hydromet agencies, so for example from Uruguay or Czech Republic, to help to train the model, our flood forecasting model, with local data. And based on this evaluation, we were able to identify that global AI models are often outperforming the state-of-the-art, for example, GLOFAS forecasts. But if you combine a global AI model with local data, it performs the strongest. So this is one aspect where we've been collaborating together with the World Meteorological Organization and selected hydromet agencies. And now very concretely on how organizations and governments are using this to help people stay safe. One aspect I'd like to highlight here is, for example, our work together with the World Food Programme and the authorities in Rwanda, so Minima and the Rwanda Water Board. We are now able to provide access to our flood forecasts to help to inform the local early warning systems. We're currently in the evaluation phase. And something that we're also looking into is how do we open source that model to help to fine-tune this on local data. And then the last example that I'd like to focus on is from OCHA and the Nigerian government. They leveraged our flood forecast as a trigger for anticipatory action in Nigeria. So here, what they've done is they used the forecast and they combined it together with local data and data from GLOFAS to build a really comprehensive intelligence platform. And this was used then as one of the triggers that were mentioned today a couple of times, that then, if reached, are triggering a series of actions to help people stay safe. That program was launched last year during summer, and it was set up to cover 350,000 people. We're now looking to expand that program further in collaboration with some of the organizations here in the room. And overall, we believe that AI has a profound opportunity to provide better insights for anticipatory action and for early warning and response, in particular in connection with social protection. This is a little bit of a reflection. I have plenty of resources and case studies that you can also look into. I can put them here in the chat.
Yes, that would be very helpful in the chat, and we can click on them and save those links for ourselves for later reading. And thank you so much for your inputs and for those examples from Uruguay and other countries. I do want to shift to audience Q&A now. And I see we have already one question for Malawi. I remember there were 2. I think maybe one has been answered already. The Q&A tab shows 10 questions that have been answered already. Others in the audience, if you want to go through, you can just click on that tab and go through those. I see one question to Malawi from Akeem. For how long have you been using PRISM? Does it predict for drought as well as flood? Mr. Mulder, would you like to come in on this, please?
Yeah, I think I'll take that one. For the Prism, I think 2 years now. We've been using it for 2 years. For both flood and the drought. I don't know if you can hear me. Sorry. Let me
Yeah, we
just.
can hear you. It was breaking in the beginning a little bit, but we can hear you now.
Yeah. So I was saying we've been using it for the past 2 years.
And it predicts for drought as well as flood, you said.
Yes.
All right, great. Thank you. We have another question from Sarah Murray. She says, great presentations. In contexts where humanitarian actors are present, what have been barriers and what enables in engaging them in EWS activities and responses? What are the priorities for alignment between humanitarian and government actors? I'll open this up to our panelists. Unless Sarah, you had this, you wanted to direct this to a particular panelist, but I'll open it up to everyone. Whoever wants to take this up, you can simply unmute and start talking. Joe, perhaps you want to come in on this? Are you there?
Hi there.
Yeah.
Can you hear
Hi.
me?
Yes.
Oh, great. Sorry, can I ask you, Kim, if you can please repeat the question, if you don't mind? Thank you.
Sure. Sure. In contexts where humanitarian actors are present, what have been barriers and what enables engaging them in EWS activities and responses? What are priorities for alignment between humanitarian and government actors?
Wow. Yeah. Loaded question. Thank you very much
It's
for
a
that
very
question.
loaded question. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Maybe I'll tackle the lower element of that question, basically the practicality and the operationalization of, defining certain standard operating procedures and triggers and bringing all these actors together. I feel in some cases, the role of organizations, humanitarian organizations, has been to act as a convener so that all parties can feel that there's a de-risking and a dialogue that can take place for interchange and exchange. I think in some places you would find mostly if we are engaging from a humanitarian or a development angle, from a humanitarian angle, our key opening doors would be disaster risk agencies and corresponding institutions. Obviously, when we're from a development stance, would be more on the social protection agencies and others. So I would say the quick answer for that would be collaboration for sure. And between all the agencies. I apologize. I feel I didn't do a great job answering the question. Please feel free, anybody else, to come in and interject at any point. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Joe. No, I think you answered it pretty well. Since I think, oh, we're getting fresh questions. I think I'll take country specific questions first, and then I'll move on to the generic ones. I see another one for Costa Rica. It's a bit unclear, but I'll try. The question is from Mariana Hoyos. For Costa Rica, what data flows currently exist and what arrangements enable this exchange? If Ms. Sandy Gordon is still online, maybe she would like to take this question up.
Sí, claro, muchísimas gracias. La información que nosotros tenemos se encuentra registrada en diferentes bases de datos. Los flujos de información con los que nosotros contamos son captadas directamente en su mayoría por las personas profesionales en el ámbito social y que estas a su vez pues tienen su repositorio en cada una de las instituciones. Entonces podemos estar hablando de información de la conformación de los hogares, donde podemos ver distintas temáticas, desde discapacidad hasta personas menores de edad, de edad, pero igualmente nuestra institución capta bases de datos de la Caja Costarricense del Seguro Social, donde ahí nosotros podríamos estar considerando información de condición laboral, ¿verdad? Si se encuentra en condición formal, desempeñándose, los ingresos que recibe por ese trabajo y el tipo de aseguramiento que también se encuentra en ese repositorio. De igual manera, y como lo mencioné en mi presentación, la información correspondiente, disculpe, la información correspondiente a los servicios eléctricos que encuentra en su gran mayoría el repositorio en el Instituto Costarricense de Electricidad. Entonces, ahí también nosotros podemos saber cuál es el costo del servicio eléctrico por el que están haciendo uso, del que están pagando. Y así podemos estar hablando de diferentes bases de datos, de las cuales nosotros tenemos un convenio que es el marco jurídico que a nosotros nos ampara para poder tener esa información. Entonces, firmamos un convenio entre las instituciones y de ahí pasamos a un proceso de desarrollo a nivel de sistemas para poder tener esa interoperabilidad y poder tener ese flujo de información. De igual manera, tenemos una vinculación con el Registro Nacional, donde nosotros podemos saber si una persona se encuentra fallecida de la forma más inmediata posible, ¿verdad? Casi que de un día para otro, y podemos saber su identificación, podemos identificarla dentro de nuestra base de datos, por eso el número de identificación y otros registros que se encuentran ahí, y de igual manera con el registro de la propiedad, nosotros podemos saber si una familia tiene o no un terreno a su nombre, o en ese caso, pues nosotros iniciamos otro proceso dentro de nuestra intervención para saber si es cedida, si es prestada o si se encuentra en otro tipo de condición. Pero ese es el flujo de información que nosotros tenemos dentro del CINEDU. Tratamos de que sea lo más ágil posible. Entonces, nuestro interés es contar con la información actualizada cada vez que se realiza un proceso de intervención y en el caso de los sistemas por interconectividad, tenemos plazos definidos, 2 días, 3 días, una semana, un mes, dependiendo de la complejidad y la cantidad de datos. Gracias.
Thank you very much for this very comprehensive response, going into data flows and other mechanisms. We have two questions which are sort of related. I will take them together. This is on data protection, and I would like very much Alexander and Joe to come in on this. I'll just read the questions out. The first one is from Alexander Lasovsky. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. For countries aligning with the EU data protection standards, what interoperability models allow effective early warning to early action without maintaining centralized household profiles? Are there examples of shock responsive systems that reconcile rapid crisis response with data minimization principles? And a related question that also that's related to data minimization is from I am so sorry, I can't pronounce this name. Dayisenga Generose. I am really sorry for butchering this name. I did not intend to. Mentioning ethnicity may help reduce inequalities in some contexts, but it also carries risks that could reinforce stigmatization in others. How do you mitigate the risk of stigmatization or exclusion associated with mentioning ethnicity if it were to arise? Joe or Alex, I open this to you.
Alex, shall I maybe take
Yeah,
take a
please
chance
go
at
ahead.
one of the. All right, thanks. Maybe I'll start with the first one. Very important question, I think, on data privacy and protection. Obviously, there are key principles that we try to abide with, sort of within the UN, specifically within the World Food Program. I think there are many local sort of actors that also play a role on that element. I think. As you probably know, there's data that is sometimes proprietary, and for the sake of protecting the individuals, there are ways of using anonymous data that is not as specific to go to a household level. in the sense that if you are downscaling weather forecasts to a street or a district or a region, then that probably will not jeopardize any of the individual data. So there's an ability to anonymize or aggregate the data and maybe act on that. From that perspective, just from that data privacy. When it comes to EU sort of data protection standards, I personally have not been exposed to that sphere, neither on ethnicity. I apologize. Thank you.
Alex, would you like to add something to this?
No, not much to add from my side. So I've also not operated within the EU data framework. I don't know. I wonder whether some colleagues from the Digital Conversions Initiative may have touched upon that. So not much to add from my side.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for that. I see there's a fresh question, and I believe this would be probably the last question we take looking at the time. This one comes from Vanza Mwatani. They say, for Rwanda, there are examples where technology solutions were planned. Are there examples where technology solutions were planned but could not be scaled due to institutional, technical, or resource-related constraints? Mr. Athanase, if you could please come in for this one.
Yes, Kim, could you again repeat the question?
Sure. The question is, for Rwanda, are there examples where technology solutions were planned but could not be scaled due to institutional, technical, or resource-related constraints?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Yes. The main constraint we have is actually the budget, because we get the budget from the central treasury. But this is to say that, for example, for our case, I say that we only cover the landslide and storms, but also the flood component. But yet we have the plan to also include more hazard, because the early warning information system that we want is the one which could be a multi-hazard early warning system. So there are plans to integrate more hazards, but because of the budget constraints, of course, we also approach donors or development partners like WFP and other agencies like GIZ. So we think that in the future we shall cover all the hazards. But to be honest, we have some constraints, especially for the budget, to be able to implement the full package of the early warning information system. This is one of the example. But in this sector, we would wish to have the multi-hazard early warning system, but this will come slowly.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much for this very candid response. Before we close, I would like to go back right to the start where we started and bring Joe back in again. Joe, very quick question for you just to close the session. Based on your experience, what factors cause governments to hesitate when sharing data between early warning agencies and social protection systems?
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes.
I wouldn't say there's a hesitation on sharing data, but I would say there are certain obstacles in the way. Probably I could categorize them as maybe either institutional or technical, technical more than anything else. You would find in some scenarios that the infrastructure that houses and carries that data isn't as capable, and the coverage would be low in terms of bandwidth or interchange of data or frequency of data and recency. Obviously, the data quality and an understanding of a data life cycle as it flows from a collection of a device. Let's say, for instance, you're looking for humidity in soil that ends up all the way into an actual system for decision making. That sort of tracking of the workflow of data is a key component in understanding where everybody is learning. So there are technical challenges, I would say, that would be infrastructural and data related, mostly those two elements. On the institutional parts, obviously, as our colleague from Malawi mentioned, the roles and responsibilities and in terms of coordination mechanism of institutions are very important, so that once you have clarity on which institution has what mandate and can activate what protocol and what resources to use if they are available, I think these would be the possibly the two elements that I would say that somehow inhibit that seamless exchange, and not anything related to anyone hesitating, because I think everyone appreciates the economic and the saving lives element of responding earlier. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you for highlighting the obstacles, because it really shows us where we need to work next. And on that forward-looking note, I want to thank all of our speakers for bringing in all these insights and case studies from their respective countries. A big thank you also to all our participants for remaining engaged till the very end of the webinar. And thank you so much for all your questions and interaction in the chat and in the Q&A box. Our next webinar will be held on February 24th from 12 to 2 GMT. The registration would be similarly via socialprotection.org, the way you registered for this one. If you want to get involved further with the DCI, you can obviously support the initiative. This is a very open group. You can contribute your expertise to our work streams. You can support the consensus building and the consensus building on standards and spread awareness about the initiative, obviously, and adopt the standards and other inputs in your projects and share feedback on how that went. How you can participate? Well, how you can participate is you can share existing materials, you can review outputs, you can join group discussions and workshops, and you can also submit your draft standards to DCI for consensus building through DCI standards committees. And of course, you can join the standards committee. Once again, thank you very much. Feel free to visit our website, our LinkedIn, Gitbook, GitHub to get involved further. And we hope to see you all in the next webinar very soon. Thank you very much.